On the telephone line is Rock and Roll Hall of Famer, founder, bassist of the legendary band Heart. We welcome in the icon, Steve Fossen. Steve, Brian C., thank you so much for being with me on KMET Radio.
All right. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, Steve. Your career in music spans over 5 decades. At what age did you find love in music, and when did you realize this is what you wanted to do for a career?
Well, I was very young, and I of course, I enjoyed Elvis, Ricky Nelson, Roy Orbison, but the one that really hit me was the Everly Brothers. The two-part harmonies just really hit home for me, and I loved singing, and I loved music, and that's kind of what got me started. And then, of course, when I was a little bit older, when the Beatles hit, Paul McCartney, being my favorite musician, was a bass player, so that's what kind of made me take up the bass.
Now, Steve, talk about some of the very first gigs you remember performing at and with whom.
Well, we had a little band that we rehearsed in the garage, and we got hired for a sock hop at my local high school, and we had 20 minutes of material, but they wanted us so bad that they let us play like an hour and a half, and we repeated the same 20 minutes every the same songs all night.
Now, some of the guitarists that you admired, can you mention a few of them and why?
Well, of course, everybody loved the British Invasion. I always really liked George Harrison, Eric Clapton, of course, but the bass players that I really enjoyed were, of course, Paul McCartney, Bill Wyman, John Paul Jones, Chris Squire. Those were the guys that really influenced me a lot.
And have you ever met Paul McCartney?
No, I have not met Paul McCartney, but I met all the other guys.
Well, that must have been an experience you won't forget, huh?
Yeah. Chris Squire was a real gentleman and a fantastic musician, and it was a great thrill to meet him. Yes.
Now I got to ask you, how did you come up with the idea to form a band, which in turn came out to be Heart?
Well, Roger Fisher, the original co-founding guitarist, along with me of Heart, we met in junior high school. And that was just about the time that the Beatles came out, and we were so enthused by, the music of the time and the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and all that kind of stuff. And we just kept thinking and dreaming and talking about being musicians. And a couple of years later, we both, Roger got a guitar and I got a bass, and we started playing. And for a couple of years, we each had our own bands, and then in 1967, we joined forces and decided to make a band. And, we both had a lot of ambition and drive, and we just kept talking about, we want someday to, write songs, do tours, record songs, do everything that our heroes and our the people that we admired were doing.
Now, how did Ann Wilson and Nancy Wilson come to play in the band?
Well, Roger,
did you know each other?
Well, no, not at the time. But Roger and I, in our course of having our partnership, we went through. There was different versions of Heart, and people would come and people would go. And then one time we had a bunch of people just decide they didn't want to play with us anymore, so we put an ad in the paper, and the ad was answered by Ann Wilson.
Wow. So you got to remember that in an industry back then that was dominated by male performers, here came Nancy and Ann, who became, female rock pioneers and who can rock with the best of them. Would you agree?
Yeah. However, when we first met Ann, Nancy was at school, so she wasn't involved so much. And Ann and Nancy at the time were more a folk. They had more of a folk type presentation, And Roger and I had more of a rock presentation, and so they kind of softened us up a little bit, and then we kind of rocked them up a little bit. So it was kind of a good thing for both of us.
We're talking to the legendary Steve Fossen of Heart. Steve, Heart had so many hit songs. The three iconic rock hits that stand in my mind are Magic Man, Crazy on You, and Barracuda. Can you tell us a little bit about each, how those three songs came into existence?
Yeah, well, Ann and Nancy had like a acoustic guitar and vocal version of Magic Man that was kind of it was very, very simple, but the chords were all there. And at the time, Mike Flicker, our producer, wanted, he thought that the album needed a really strong opening song, so he got the drummer and I to come up with the signature chunky parts during the song. So we came up with we came up with and we wrote the music for the lead part and the move part in the middle, and it turned out to be a really good song. We still kept the acoustic guitar in there, but we had real strong electric rhythm and real strong electric lead in there too. So it's one of my favorite songs, and it happens to be one of the highest testing radio songs ever in the history of radio testing. So real proud of that. Crazy on You came about by, I had a song called Crazy Eyes, and I presented it to the band, and it had the A minor to G to F progression in it. And a couple weeks later, it came back as Crazy on You. And, of course, Ann and Nancy added more to it in the meantime, but then we made a great recording track of it in the studio and had a great drum part and bass part and everything. And it turned out to be a very iconic song that people still love to this day. And Barracuda, the main lick for Barracuda was a sound check riff that Mike DeRozier and Roger Fisher came up with to, so that the sound guy and the monitor guys could get the levels and all that kind of stuff. And people were listening to it and thinking, wow, that's pretty cool. And Ann listened to it too, and Nancy, and then they added to it, and that became Barracuda.
Yeah, I mean, Barracuda was released, I believe, in 1977, and it became your first 45 single hit, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Magic Man and Crazy on You were were high on the charts too before that. But yeah, Barracuda was a very big song for us, and it's still to this day. I mean, it's used in so many movies and commercials, and I'll be listening to a football game, and you'll hear Barracuda play sometimes at the stadiums, and then sometimes they'll use it as music to cut away to commercials.
Yeah, and it was the song that you played at the your Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction.
Well, Ann and Nancy and Howard and Mike and Roger and I, we played Crazy on You at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction.
And that was 2013, if I believe correct.
It was 2013, yes. Very proud of that moment, yes. Thank you.
Absolutely. Congratulations. We're talking to the legendary Steve Fossen. Steve, if you recall, what was the deal that happened with Mushroom Records and CBS label? Did Heart get into legal battles back then? Yeah.
Mushroom Records was kind of more of a mom and pop type situation. I mean, we had very ironclad contracts signed and everything, but the the owners of the company kind of wanted to treat us like they were like Colonel Parker and we were Elvis. And instead of paying us the royalties, this is my take on it anyway. Instead of paying us the royalties that would do us, they just asked us, well, how much money do you need? And they do us, So we kind of put our foot down and said, no, we're not going to do it that way. The contract says you owe us this amount of money, so we want this amount of money. And for some reason they didn't want to do it that way. So that kind of gave us a way to get out of the contract. And by that time, we had Dreamboat Annie was like double platinum, and the people in the record industry, Heart was becoming a very popular item, and they wanted, there's other companies that wanted to sign us, and CBS kind of understood the situation, and they helped us get released from Mushroom Records, and then we signed with them.
Oh, they did. Okay. Now, the late 70s, you saw a transition change with the lineup of the band. Why was guitarist Roger Fisher let go? Is that true or not? Because I read a lot about that incident. Was he let go of the band? Is that accurate or false?
Yeah, well, Roger and Nancy were a couple during the whole beginnings of Heart, during the Dreamboat Annie, the Little Queen, the magazine era. And they kind of had a parting of the ways. And Roger was having a tough time dealing with it, and he didn't seem very happy with the situation that he was in Heart. So, I mean, we just had parting of the ways, basically.
We're talking to Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Steve Fossen. Steve, getting into the Hall of Fame obviously is a big honor. What do you remember leading up to that big event?
Well, we had been nominated the year before, and we didn't make it the first time we were nominated. So, I mean, that was a huge disappointment, but, you kind of understood that, being nominated was a great honor. So the next year we were nominated again, which was a great relief and honor again. And this time it seemed like, well, if they're going to nominate us again, it probably means that there was enough interest the first time to almost make it, so we're probably going to make it this time. And that was the case. But, however, I had totally forgotten that the day of the announcement was coming, and I was totally forgot about it. And I got a phone call from a good friend that said, from the Hall of Fame, that said that we'd made it, and I was at the time speechless. And it's just proven to be such a great honor. And the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is there's such dedicated, great people that work there, and it's just been such a great pleasure to be part of it all these years.
Well, I mean, the band is definitely a pioneer rock band, and, it's that type of caliber band. So, I mean, and all the hits you had, I mean, I would say your type of music was copied by many of the current bands that are playing now.
Yeah, we were very influenced by the people that came before us too. So I think it's like a cycle that we were influenced by these people, and then our music influenced the next people, and it's and the next bands and stuff, and it's such a great feeling to know that we've influenced all these musicians to get started playing music, and then our music is still played, like on the hit The Voice, the singer shows, The Voice, and all that kind of stuff. They still play Heart music. So it's to hear the songs that we created back in the 70s played to this day is so great.
I mean, that's how you know you created something special, Steve. I mean, when it's playing 40 years after the fact that you created and it's still a hit today, especially in New York City rock radio, I mean, that's how you know you created something special.
Yeah, and the thing of it is, like, I listen to classic radio in my car and stuff, and it still sounds good to this day. I mean, Mike Flicker, our producer at the time, was such a great producer, and he got such great sounds and great arrangements and performances out of all of us that they still sound great to this day.
Now, Steve, in '82, you decided to leave Heart. Why did you decide to leave the band, and what played a major factor in your decision process to part ways?
Well, that was we had been in L.A. recording an album called Private Audition, and Mike and I were not all that thrilled with the direction that Ann and Nancy were taking the band, and we kind of let our feelings be known, and they probably thought we were being, being very negative about the whole thing, and they wanted to, so they felt that they needed to, pump some new blood into the band. So it wasn't actually my decision to leave, but at the same time, it was kind of a relief. And, the personalities and everything were starting to be kind of, I don't know. It was a tough situation. So, and my own personhood as a man and everything was trying to come out of me, and I felt like it was being kind of put in the background, so to speak.
So would you say that was a confusing time in your life? Did you have sleepless nights thinking if this would be the right decision to make, parting ways?
Well, it was a really tough time for me, and it was a lot. There was a lot going on that I didn't like, but at the same time, I knew, me being, if you fall down, if you're an American, you fall down or whatever, you get back up, and that's what I did. I just, you just know that there's something on the horizon for you, and you just, even though times are tough, you just work for that, for the time when things get better.
And you did do that, Steve. You created Heart by Heart, correct? Talk a little bit about Heart by Heart.
Well, Heart by Heart was started by Summer Masick, our singer, and I. When we met, we became friends, and then that friendship developed into a romance. And that romance, we had a bass and vocal duo, and we were getting calls and gigs around Seattle, playing different clubs and bistros and weddings and stuff like that. And people liked it, but we came to the conclusion that just being a vocal and bass duo was not enough. So we called Mike DeRosier, and at the time we called Randy Hansen, and we made an official band. And we kept rehearsing and everything, and people heard about it. And the next thing you know, the booking agents around here, around the Seattle area, were booking us in Washington State. And then through our website, people heard about Heart by Heart. And then we started getting calls from the East Coast and West Coast, and now we play all over America.
Yeah, we're going to play a couple of minutes of your iconic hits, Steve. But before that, let's mention your website. It's heartbyheart.com, correct?
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
And on that website, it mentions your tour dates. Heart by Heart is still touring. So when's your next travel, your the big concert, the big venue? You want to mention a few dates?
We have some shows in the Seattle area. We're playing one of our favorite casinos in Kingston. It's called The Point. We always do 2 nights there in usually early December or late November. So we're doing that in a couple weeks. And then we play a theater called the Admiral Theater in Bremerton for New Year's Eve. And then after New Year's, then we start going on the road again, and we'll go to Tarpon Springs, Florida, and then we have some other gigs booked around it. I can't remember right now. But, yeah, our website has all that stuff.
All right, so we're going to play a little bit of the iconic songs by Heart. Sean, let's play Heart.
Come on, girl, here's a smile. You don't have to love me, and let's get out of line. Heartless, heartless, never out of control. How do I get you alone? Ooh, she said, kick it out. Come on, even it up, even it up, even it up. What about love? Don't you want someone that care about you? Everybody ought to call you baby strange. You look so insane. Heading out to somewhere. Won't be back for a while. Crazy on you. Let me go crazy, crazy on you. Coming straight on for you. You made my mind. Dog and butterfly. Yeah. I've always held the wind, but I let the wind steal my mind. Ooh, you better keep your love now, keep your love alive. Ooh. Try to understand. He's a magic man. Yeah. Oh.
Wow, Steve, I would say powerful, energetic, and legendary.
Wow, thank you very much. Really appreciate you playing that stuff. It sounded nice. Thank you.
Yeah, now, my final question, how would you rate the songs which Heart created, released in the 70s compared to the 80s? You feel the earlier stuff was better? Why not?
Well, the earlier stuff was the culmination of the band being together for 3 or 4 years, playing a lot of clubs, having a lot of experiences together on the road and around, where we lived. And we lived in Vancouver, British Columbia at the time. And it was our first, foray into, original music. And it was very creative. And, I don't know, it just, the songs just had they had the performances from the musicians, they had the poetry, they had the lyrics, they had the singing, they had the harmonies. And the songs in the 80s were, and plus the stuff in the 70s was all written by, the members of Heart. So, but then when the 80s came along, they were having trouble selling stuff, so they the record company wanted them to use other writers, so they chose to. I mean, they did some great songs in the '80s too, and that sold really well, and people really still loved. So it was just different. It wasn't quite as creative, maybe in the traditional creative way, but it was creative in a different way, and it was still really good.
Yeah, and just quickly, another question that comes to mind: this rock and roll industry, the memorabilia business, is such a big business. Just out of curiosity, are you a collector of rock memorabilia?
Well, I have a lot of stuff from the late 70s and early 80s from Heart. So that's the stuff I collected. I have a lot of that stuff. But what I tended to collect more was like amplifiers and basses and speakers and stuff like that.
Well, they're telling me I have a few seconds left. Listen, I really appreciate your time. It was an honor to speak with you, Steve.
Well, thank you for having me on. It was an honor to speak with you, too. It was an honor to be on your program.
Absolutely. All the best to you. And, we'll mention your website one more time.
Okay. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care of yourself, Steve.
Yeah, take care. Thanks, Brian.
My pleasure. That was Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Steve Fossen, and the website is heartbyheart.com. And until next week, happy collecting to all.